The leather-bound diary sat on Detective Carmen Reyes's desk like an accusation. Marco Dante stared at it through the glass window of the police station conference room, his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles had gone white. 3 days ago, he buried his wife. 3 days ago, he stood at Isabella's graveside in his $1,000 suit, accepting condolences from people who whispered behind their hands about how devoted he'd been, how tragic her sudden death was, how he must be devastated. They had no idea. "Mr. Dante," Detective Reyes said gently, sliding the diary across the table toward him. "I know this is difficult, but we need you to look at this. It was found in your wife's belongings during our routine investigation into her death." Marco's dark eyes fixed on the book. He recognized it. A gift he'd given Isabella on their first anniversary, back when he still remembered things like anniversaries. The burgundy leather was worn now, the gold leaf embossing of her initials, faded from years of handling. "What is this about?" His voice carried the authority of a man who commanded Chicago's most powerful crime family, but underneath, Detective Reyes heard something else. Fear. "Your wife kept a diary, Mr. Dante. The medical examiner has ruled her death as heart failure brought on by severe stress and an undiagnosed condition." "But—" The detective paused, choosing her words carefully. "There are entries in here that suggest Mrs. Dante was aware of her deteriorating health, and that she tried to tell you." Marco's jaw tightened. "Isabella never said anything about being sick. Perhaps you should read it yourself." Detective Reyes stood, giving him privacy. "Take your time. I'll be outside if you need anything." The door clicked shut, and Marco was alone with his dead wife's final words. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. His hands trembled as he opened the diary to the first marked page. Detective Reyes had placed small yellow tabs throughout the book, a trail of breadcrumbs leading to his own damnation. October 15th. Marco came home at 3 a.m. again. "I pretended to be asleep because I couldn't bear another conversation where he looks through me like I'm invisible. The doctor called today about my test results. She wants me to come back in for more tests. She used the word concerning. I tried to tell Marco at breakfast, but his phone rang, Vincent Torino's name on the screen, and he walked away mid-sentence. I sat there with my coffee getting cold, wondering when I became so easy to ignore." Marco's throat constricted. October 15th. He remembered that call from Torino. The bastard had been trying to muscle in on the North Side shipping contracts. Marco had spent the next 3 weeks orchestrating a response that left Torino's organization crippled. He'd been so focused on the win that he'd barely come home at all. He flipped to the next tab. November 3rd. The cardiologist confirmed what I already suspected. "My heart is failing. Something genetic," she said. "That probably wouldn't have been a problem if not for the stress." She asked about my home life, whether I felt supported. I laughed. Actually laughed right there in her office. She prescribed medication and rest and reduced emotional strain. I didn't tell her that my husband hasn't touched me in 4 months. That he doesn't know I wake up every night with chest pains because he's never there to notice. That I'm dying of loneliness in a mansion full of people. I tried to talk to him tonight. Actually made him sit down at the dinner table. I got as far as, "Marco, I need to tell you something important," before his second phone buzzed. The one he thinks I don't know about. The one that only Sophia calls. He looked at the screen, and his face did that thing. Softened in a way it never does for me anymore, and he said, "Can this wait? I have to take this." I said yes. I always say yes. I'm saying yes while I'm dying. Marco's hands shook so violently that the diary slipped from his grasp, falling open to a page near the end. His eyes caught on a single line of his wife's elegant handwriting. I was pregnant. The world stopped. He snatched up the diary, searching for the full entry, his heart hammering against his ribs. December 8th. I was pregnant. Past tense. Was. I found out 3 weeks ago, the same day the cardiologist told me the pregnancy would put too much strain on my heart, that I needed to terminate or risk my life. I was going to tell Marco that night. I had the whole speech planned, how we'd figure it out together, how maybe this baby could be what brought us back to each other. But he didn't come home. He was at the Ritz-Carlton penthouse suite, room 1847. I know because I called the hotel, pretending to be his assistant. They connected me right to the room. A woman answered. She laughed before hanging up. I sat in our bedroom with the pregnancy test in one hand and the cardiologist's warning in the other, and I made the decision alone. Just like I make every decision alone now. I lost the baby 2 days later. My body rejected it, the doctor said, probably due to stress and the heart condition. Marco was in New York closing some deal. He texted to say he'd be back in a few days. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That's what we've become. Emojis instead of conversations. I bled out our baby into a toilet at 2 a.m. and sent my husband a fucking thumbs up. Marco stood abruptly, the chair clattering backward. He braced himself against the table, his breath coming in harsh gasps. Isabella had been pregnant. She'd lost their baby. She'd nearly died. And he'd been with Sophia, laughing in a hotel room while his wife suffered alone. Mr. Dante? Detective Reyes opened the door, concern crossing her face. Do you need? Get out, he growled. When she hesitated, he roared. Get out. The door closed quickly. Marco was alone again with the evidence of his failures. He forced himself to keep reading, though every word felt like a knife to his chest. December 20th. Marco gave me a diamond bracelet for our anniversary today. Cartier. Probably cost more than most people make in a year. He had his assistant pick it out. I could tell because it came in the store bag with a generic card that said, with love. No personal message. No thought. Just expensive emptiness. I wanted to throw it in his face. Instead, I put it on and said thank you. Because that's what a good mafia wife does, right? We smile and say thank you for the scraps of attention. We wear our diamonds like chains and pretend we're lucky. My heart is getting worse. The medication isn't working as well anymore. Dr. Chun says I need to consider more aggressive treatment, possibly surgery. She also says I need to reduce stress. I asked her how I'm supposed to do that when my husband is in love with someone else. She couldn't answer that. I haven't told Marco about the surgery. What's the point? He'd probably send Vincent or one of his other men to sit with me. He's outsourced every other aspect of our marriage. Why not this too? Marco's vision blurred. He wiped his eyes roughly, angry at the tears, angry at himself, angry at the dead woman who was making him face what he'd become. The next entry was shorter. January 15th. I tried one more time tonight. Marco was actually home, working in his study. I brought him coffee, the way he likes it, with just a splash of cream, and sat down across from him. I said, I'm sick, really sick, and I'm scared. He looked up from his papers for maybe 3 seconds. We have the best doctors money can buy, Isabella. Make an appointment. Put it on my calendar if you need me to be there. Then his eyes went back to his contracts. I sat there for a full minute, watching him work, waiting for him to realize what I'd said, waiting for him to see me. He never looked up again. I left the coffee on his desk. It was probably cold before he even noticed it was there. I'm done trying. I'm done begging for scraps of my own husband's attention. If Marco Dante wants to lose himself in his empire and his mistress, then let him. When I'm gone, he can have both without guilt. That's probably what he wants anyway. Me out of the way, so he can marry Sophia and start the family he clearly doesn't want with me. My surgery is scheduled for February 14th, Valentine's Day. The irony isn't lost on me. I'll go alone. I'll recover alone. I'll live or die alone, just like I've been doing for the past year. But there had been no surgery on February 14th, because Isabella had died on February 10th, 4 days before her scheduled procedure. Marco flipped toward the end of the diary, his hands shaking so badly he could barely turn the pages. The final entries were shorter, the handwriting less steady. February 7th. Chest pain so bad today I couldn't get out of bed until noon. Maria found me and wanted to call 911. I made her promise not to. Marco had that big meeting with the commission. I wasn't going to embarrass him by being rushed to the hospital during the most important negotiation of his career. I'm not sure when I became the kind of woman who prioritizes her husband's business reputation over her own life. But here we are. Marco didn't come home at all last night. Sophia posted a photo on her private Instagram, the one she doesn't know I found. They were at some restaurant in the Gold Coast. He was smiling. Actually smiling. I haven't seen him smile like that in so long I'd forgotten what it looked like. I used to make him smile like that. February 9th. Something is wrong. Really wrong. The chest pains are constant now. My left arm keeps going numb. I called Dr. Chen, but she's in surgery until tonight. I left a message. Marco is home for once, but he's locked in his study with Vincent and the others. I can hear them through the door, shouting about territories and respect and all the things that matter more than a dying wife in the next room. I thought about knocking, interrupting, making them see me, but I'm so tired of fighting for attention, tired of being invisible in my own home, tired of loving someone who stopped loving me back. I'm going to lie down. Maybe I'll feel better after a nap. That was the last regular entry. But on the final page, written in handwriting that was barely legible, were the words that would haunt Marco Dante for the rest of his life. February 10th. Can't breathe. Called Marco voicemail. Texted, no response. Called again, declined. He declined my call. I'm dying and my husband declined my call. This is it. I can feel it. This is how it ends. Alone in our bedroom while he's somewhere else. Always somewhere else. Marco, if you ever read this, know that you killed me. Not with your hands. With your indifference. With your absence. With every ignored call and dismissed conversation and moment you chose anything, everything over me. You killed me by making me invisible. And the worst part, I loved you until the very end. Even now, as my heart fails, I love you. And that might be the saddest thing of all. You killed me, Marco. But I forgive you. I hope someday you can forgive yourself. The diary fell from Marco's hands as a sound tore from his throat, something between a roar and a sob. He swept everything off the conference table in one violent motion. Papers, pens, the cold coffee Detective Reyes had left. All of it crashed to the floor. Isabella had died calling for him. She'd reached out one final time, and he declined the call because he'd been with Sophia, celebrating the successful acquisition of the Southside ports. He declined his dying wife's call because he'd been too busy popping champagne with his mistress. The door burst open. Detective Reyes rushed in with 2 uniformed officers, but Marco barely registered their presence. He stood in the ruins of the conference room, his expensive suit rumpled, his carefully maintained composure shattered completely. "She called me," he said, his voice hollow. "When she was dying, she called me and I didn't answer. I didn't answer." Detective Reyes approached cautiously, like she was approaching a wounded animal. "Mr. Dante, perhaps you should sit down. We can discuss." "Discuss what?" Marco's laugh was bitter, broken. "How did I murder my wife through sheer neglect? How I was so consumed with my empire and my affair that I let her die alone. There's nothing to discuss, Detective. It's all right there." He gestured at the diary. "Every ignored plea for help. Every conversation is dismissed conversation. Every moment I chose literally anything over her. She documented it all. She wrote me a fucking roadmap to my own damnation." He moved toward the door, but the detective stepped into his path. "Mr. Dante, I need to ask, where were you the night of February 10th when your wife died?" Marco met her eyes, and what she saw there made her take an involuntary step back. "I was at the Ritz-Carlton, room 1847, with my mistress. My wife died trying to reach me, and I was in bed with another woman." He smiled, and it was the most terrible expression Detective Reyes had ever seen. "You want to arrest me for that, Detective? Lock me up for being the worst kind of husband? Go ahead. Prison would be kinder than living with what I've done." "Mr. Dante, I'm leaving now." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "And if you're smart, you'll let me. Because I have business to attend to. People to see. Mistakes to correct." He paused at the door, looking back at the diary one last time. "Can I take that?" Detective Reyes hesitated, then nodded. "It's not evidence of a crime. Your wife died of natural causes, as tragic as the circumstances were. The diary is yours." Marco picked it up, holding it like it might disintegrate in his hands. "Natural causes," he repeated softly. "Is that what we're calling it? Because I'm pretty sure the cause of death was me." He walked out of the police station into the cold Chicago afternoon. His driver, Vincent, stood beside the black Mercedes, his expression carefully neutral despite the fact that his boss looked like he'd been through hell. "Where to, boss?" Marco slid into the back seat, the diary still clutched in his hands. "The Ritz-Carlton." "Sir, you heard me." Marco's voice was ice. Take me to the Ritz-Carlton. Room 1847. Vincent drove in silence, stealing glances at his boss in the rearview mirror. In 15 years of working for Marco Dante, he'd never seen the man look like this. Hollowed out, haunted, like something essential had been carved from his chest. The hotel lobby was elegant and discreet, the kind of place where rich men brought their secrets. Marco moved through it like an avenging angel, his presence parting the crowds. He didn't stop at the front desk, didn't acknowledge the concerned looks from staff who recognized him. He went straight to the elevator, punched the button for the 18th floor, and waited. The ride up felt like an eternity and an instant. The diary seemed to burn in his hands, Isabella's words echoing in his mind. "You killed me, Marco." Room 1847. He stood outside the door for a long moment, then knocked. Sophia answered, her face lighting up when she saw him. She was beautiful, tall, sophisticated, with the kind of polish that came from expensive salons and designer everything. She wore a silk robe that barely covered her thighs, clearly expecting him. "Marco, I didn't think you'd make it today. I know you've been dealing with everything." She reached for him, but he stepped back. "Get dressed," he said flatly. "What?" "Get dressed." His voice carried a note of command that made her flinch. "We're done, Sophia. This," he gestured at the room, at her, at the entire sordid affair, "is over." Sophia's expression shifted from confusion to anger. "Done? Marco, what are you talking about? I've been patient while you've dealt with your wife's death, but don't." The word cracked like a whip. "Don't you dare talk about Isabella. You don't get to say her name. You don't get to pretend you had anything but contempt for her. Your wife knew what you were when she married you." Sophia's voice rose. She knew the life she was signing up for. If she couldn't handle it. Marco moved so fast that Sophia stumbled backward. He didn't touch her, but his presence was threatening enough. "My wife was dying. She had a heart condition, and she was dying, and instead of being there for her, I was here with you. She lost our baby, Sophia, and I was here celebrating business deals and fucking you in a hotel room." Sophia's face paled. I didn't know about a baby." "Of course you didn't. Because I didn't know. Because Isabella tried to tell me, and I was too busy to listen. Too important. Too consumed with building my empire and maintaining my mistress." He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and showed her the screen. "This is Isabella's last call to me. February 10th, 9:47 p.m. I declined it. Do you remember what we were doing at 9:47 p.m. on February 10th? Sophia's silence was answer enough. "We were in bed," Marco continued, his voice hollow. "I declined my dying wife's call so you wouldn't be interrupted. She died less than an hour later. Alone. Calling for a husband who chose his mistress over her. Marco, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Get out." He moved to the door, opening it wide. "Get out of this room. Get out of this hotel. Get out of my life. If I ever see you again, Sophia, if you ever try to contact me, I will destroy you. Do you understand?" She grabbed her purse, her face a mix of shock and anger, but whatever she saw in Marco's eyes made her think better of arguing. She brushed past him without another word. When the door closed behind her, Marco stood alone in the room where he'd spent so many hours that should have been spent with his wife. The room where he'd laughed while Isabella suffered. Where he'd celebrated victories while she lost their baby. Where he declined her final call. He pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Vincent, I need you to do something for me. Anything, boss. I want you to burn this room. Not literally, I'm not that far gone yet. But I want every trace of what happened here erased. New carpets, new furniture, new everything. Then I want you to donate the cost to the Cardiac Research Foundation in Isabella's name. Consider it done. And Vincent, cancel all my meetings for the next month. Cancel everything. I have things I need to do." Marco hung up and looked around the luxurious suite one last time. Then he walked out, leaving behind not just the room, but the man he'd been, the man who'd let his wife die because he was too blind to see what he was losing. The Dante mansion felt like a mausoleum. Marco stood in the doorway of the master bedroom he'd shared with Isabella, unable to cross the threshold. For 3 days since reading the diary, he'd been unable to sleep, unable to eat, unable to do anything but replay every moment of his failure. Maria, their housekeeper, hovered in the hallway behind him. She'd been with them since the beginning, had watched their marriage deteriorate, had probably known Isabella was dying before Marco did. "Mr. Dante," she said softly, "you should eat something. You haven't had a proper meal since I buried my wife." Marco's voice was raw. "Since I learned I killed her through sheer indifference." Maria stepped forward, her weathered face showing a courage most of a soldier's lacked. "Mrs. Isabella wouldn't want you destroying yourself like this, wouldn't she?" Marco pulled out the diary, which had become his constant companion. "Have you read this, Maria? Do you know what she wrote about me?" "I know she loved you," Maria said firmly. "Until the very end, she loved you." The words hit harder than any accusation could have. "That makes it worse. Don't you see? If she'd hated me, if she'd been angry, at least that would make sense. But she loved me, and I let her die anyway." He finally stepped into the bedroom. Everything was exactly as Isabella had left it, her reading glasses on the nightstand, her robe hanging on the bathroom door, the indent in her pillow where her head had rested that final night. Marco moved to her vanity, where a lifetime of small treasures sat gathering dust. Photos from their wedding. God, they'd been so young. 24 and 21, full of hope and promises that Marco had systematically broken. There was Isabella's jewelry box, the one that held the Cartier bracelet he'd had his assistant buy. She'd worn it to the funeral, Maria had told him. Even in death, Isabella had played the role of devoted wife. He opened the top drawer and found it full of letters. His letters, from the early days when he'd still been building his empire and had to travel frequently. He picked one up at random, barely recognizing his own handwriting. "My dearest Isabella, Boston is cold and empty without you. I close deals and shake hands and pretend to care about these contracts, but all I can think about is getting home to you. You are my North Star, the reason behind every risk I take. I'm building this empire for us, for the family we'll have, for the life you deserve. 3 more days and I'll be home. 3 more days until I can hold you again. Forever yours, Marco." He crushed the letter in his fist. When had he stopped writing her letters? When had business stopped being for them and started being instead of them? When had he traded his North Star for fool's gold? His phone buzzed. Vincent's name flashed on the screen, along with a text. "Torino's men spotted near the South Side docks. Requesting orders." Marco stared at the message. 3 days ago, this would have been his entire focus. Vincent Torino trying to muscle back in on territory, challenging his authority, threatening his empire. Now it felt absurdly meaningless. Who gave a damn about docks and shipping contracts when Isabella was dead? But she wasn't just dead. She died because he'd been too consumed with exactly this kind of territorial pissing match to notice his wife was dying. He typed back, "Stand down. No action without my direct order." The response was immediate. "Boss, if we don't respond, they'll think we're weak." Marco's laugh was bitter. "We are weak, Vincent. We're weak where it matters." He turned off his phone and continued his archaeological dig through Isabella's life. In the closet, he found boxes of things she'd saved, ticket stubs from movies they'd seen together in the early days, a dried rose from their first Valentine's Day, a menu from the little Italian restaurant where he proposed. Each item was a ghost of the man he used to be. Behind the boxes, pushed into the far corner, was something that made Marco's blood run cold. A baby blanket. Soft, yellow, with little ducks embroidered on it. She bought this after she found out she was pregnant, even knowing the risks, even knowing she'd probably have to terminate. She bought a baby blanket. And then she'd hidden it away after the miscarriage, unable to throw it out, unable to look at it. Marco sank to the closet floor, clutching the blanket, and finally let himself break. The sobs came from somewhere deep in his chest, a howling grief that had been building since he'd read those final diary entries. He cried for Isabella, for their baby, for the man he'd been and the monster he'd become. "Mr. Dante?" Maria's voice was thick with her own tears. "I'm so sorry. I should have told you. I should have made you listen. Did you know?" Marco looked up at her, his face wet. "About the baby? About how sick she was?" Maria nodded, guilt etched in every line of her face. "She made me promise not to tell you. She said you had too much on your plate, that you'd worry, that it would distract you from important business." The housekeeper's voice broke. I should have told you anyway. I should have made you see. No. Marco stood slowly, still holding the blanket. This isn't your failure, Maria. It's mine. Isabella shouldn't have needed to ask you to keep her secrets. I should have been the kind of husband she could tell. I should have been present enough to notice. He walked to the bedroom window, looking out over the grounds of his estate. Acres of manicured perfection, all of it bought with blood money and broken promises. Tell me about that night. February 10th. What happened? Maria's hands twisted in her apron. She came to me around 7. Said she wasn't feeling well, that her chest hurt. I wanted to call an ambulance, but she refused. Said you had that big meeting with the commission, that she didn't want to embarrass you by causing a scene. Tears rolled down the older woman's cheeks. She went to lie down in your bedroom. Said she'd call you if it got worse. And I didn't answer. Marco's voice was hollow. She tried 3 times. I was with her the last time. When your call went to voicemail, Maria couldn't continue. What? She smiled, this sad, broken smile. And she said, he's busy building his empire. That's what matters. That's what always matters. Then she took out that diary and wrote something. After that, she just closed her eyes. I thought she was resting. When I checked on her 20 minutes later, Maria covered her face with her hands. She was gone. Just gone. Like she'd been waiting for permission to leave. Marco's grip on the baby blanket tightened until his knuckles went white. Isabella had died believing he cared more about business than her. She died thinking she was an inconvenience, an interruption to his important life. And the hell of it was, she'd been right. Maria, he said quietly, I need you to do something for me. Anything, Mr. Dante. I need you to tell me everything. Every doctor's appointment I missed. Every time she tried to talk to me about something important. Every moment I failed her. Don't spare my feelings. I need to know exactly what kind of husband I was. Maria looked uncertain. Sir, I don't think. Please. The word came out as a broken whisper. I need to understand. I need to face all of it. So Maria talked. She talked about the morning Isabella had morning sickness, so bad she couldn't leave the bathroom, and Marco had left for work without even checking on her. She talked about the night Isabella had chest pains, so severe she'd crawled to the bathroom to avoid waking him, except he hadn't been home anyway. She talked about all the dinners Isabella had cooked and waited for him to come home, only to eat alone as the food grew cold. She used to set your place at the table every night, Maria said. Even when she knew you wouldn't be there. Even at the very end. She'd set out your plate and your silverware and your wine glass like you were coming home any minute. It was the saddest thing I've ever seen. Marco felt each revelation like a physical blow. By the time Maria finished, he understood with crystal clarity exactly what kind of monster he'd been. Not the kind who hurt with his fists, but the kind who destroyed through absence, through neglect, through 1,000 small abandonments that added up to one fatal rejection. His phone buzzed again. Multiple texts from Vincent, increasingly urgent. The Torino situation was escalating. His men needed direction. His empire needed its king. Marco looked at the messages, then at the baby blanket in his hands, then at the bedroom where his wife had died alone. For the first time in his adult life, Marco Dante made a choice that had nothing to do with business, money, or power. He called Vincent. Boss, thank God. Torino's men just... I don't care, Marco interrupted. Whatever they're doing, let them do it. Silence on the other end. Then, boss, I don't understand. If we don't respond, then we don't respond. Vincent, I need you to listen carefully. For the next month, maybe longer, I'm stepping back from operations. You're in charge. What? Marco, you can't just... My wife died, Vincent. My pregnant wife died trying to reach me because I was too busy playing mob boss to answer my phone. So yeah, I can just step back. I need to. Because if I don't, I'm going to end up eating a bullet just to stop feeling this guilt. Where will you be? Here. In this house. Learning about the woman I married and ignored. Trying to figure out if there's any way to make amends to a ghost. Marco paused. And Vincent, if anyone asks where I am, tell them the truth. Tell them Marco Dante finally realized he built an empire on his wife's grave, and he's trying to figure out if that makes him a king or just another murderer. He hung up before Vincent could argue. Over the next 2 weeks, Marco did something he'd never done before. He stopped. He stopped taking calls, stopped attending meetings, stopped pretending that his empire mattered more than understanding what he'd lost. Instead, he read. He read every page of Isabella's diary, not just the marked ones. He read about her hopes and dreams, her fears and frustrations. He read about the early days when she'd been so in love with him she could barely breathe. He read about the slow deterioration of that love as he chose business over her, again and again and again. June 12th, year 1. Marco surprised me with a picnic today in Grant Park. Just the two of us, a blanket, and a basket of my favorite foods. We lay in the grass for hours, watching clouds and making up stories about what shapes we saw. He pointed at one and said, "That's our future, big and bright and full of possibility. I've never been happier. I'm married to my best friend, and it feels like we can conquer anything together." October 3rd, year 2. Marco missed our anniversary dinner. I waited at the restaurant for 2 hours before giving up. He texted around midnight to apologize, said there was a crisis with the union negotiations. I know his work is important. I know he's building something big, but I'm starting to wonder where I fit in all his plans for the future. Am I part of the empire he's building, or just an accessory to it? March 15th, year 3. I don't remember the last time we made love. Not just had sex. We still do that occasionally when he remembers I exist, but actually made love. The kind where he looks at me like I'm the most important thing in his world. Now, when he touches me, I can tell his mind is somewhere else. Probably running numbers or planning his next move against the Torino family. I'm a body in his bed, not a woman he loves. And the worst part, I'm starting to accept it. Each entry was a knife to Marco's heart. He saw the exact trajectory of his failure, from devoted husband to absent partner to outright neglectful spouse. And through it all, Isabella's love shone through, even as it slowly suffocated under the weight of his indifference. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. On the 15th day of his self-imposed exile, Marco received an unexpected visitor. Detective Reyes arrived at the mansion with a manila envelope, her expression professionally sympathetic. "Mr. Dante, I'm sorry to intrude. I know you've been processing, but something came up that I thought you should know about." Marco, who hadn't shaved or changed clothes in days, gestured her inside. They sat in the library, surrounded by books Isabella had loved and he'd never taken the time to read. "What is it?" Detective Reyes slid the envelope across the table. "We continued investigating your wife's death, standard procedure for anyone who dies at home under the age of 50. During that investigation, we discovered some anomalies." "Anomalies?" "Your wife's medical records show that she was taking medication for her heart condition. Strong medication that should have helped manage her symptoms." The detective paused. "Except the prescription was never filled after December. She stopped taking her medication 2 months before she died." Marco's blood ran cold. "What? Why would she?" "According to her pharmacy records, Mrs. Dante called to ask about the cost of the medication without insurance coverage. When they told her it was $1,500 per month, she said she'd get back to them. She never did. But we have insurance. Excellent insurance. And even if we didn't, money isn't." Marco stopped as the horrible truth sank in. "She didn't want me to know. She didn't want me to see the charges and start asking questions." "That's our theory," Detective Reyes said gently. "We also found receipts in her personal effects. She'd been paying for her doctor's visits out of pocket, using money from a credit card in her maiden name. Like she was trying to manage her illness without anyone noticing." Marco stood abruptly, his chest tight with rage and grief. "She was dying, and she went into debt trying to hide it from me. Because I'd made it so clear that her problems weren't as important as my business." "Mr. Dante, do you know what the worst part is, Detective?" Marco's voice cracked. "I could have saved her. If I just answered one call, showed up for one doctor's appointment, noticed she was in pain, I could have gotten her the treatment she needed. Instead, she died broke and alone, trying not to inconvenience the husband who was supposed to love her." Detective Reyes stood as well. "Mr. Dante, I know you're grieving, but I came here for another reason." She pulled out another document. These are your wife's medical records from her OBGYN. The same one who confirmed her pregnancy. I know about the baby, Marco said flatly. I know about the miscarriage. I know about all of it. Did you know your wife had an appointment scheduled for February 14th? The surgery to correct her heart condition. Marco shook his head. The doctor's notes indicate that the procedure had a 90% success rate. If your wife had made it to that appointment, she would likely have survived. The doctor also noted that Mrs. Dante specifically requested the surgery be scheduled when you'd be out of town. You had a trip to Vegas planned for that week. She didn't want you to have to change your travel plans. Marco sat down heavily, his legs no longer able to support him. Isabella had scheduled life-saving surgery around his Vegas trip. His Vegas trip that hadn't even been for business. It had been for the annual organized crime convention, essentially a networking event where mob bosses compared territories and made deals. She'd been willing to go into surgery alone, so he could attend a glorified cocktail party. There's one more thing, Detective Reyes said. She pulled out a final document, this one showing phone records. These are your wife's call logs for February 10th. The day she died. Marco took the paper with shaking hands. He saw the 3 calls to his number, all declined or sent to voicemail. But there were other calls too. 1 to 911 that lasted less than 10 seconds. She called for help, then apparently changed her mind. 2 calls to Maria's cell phone, both lasting several minutes. And then at 10:15 p.m., 15 minutes before her estimated time of death, one final call. To her mother. Marco's throat closed up. Isabella's mother had died when she was 16. The fact that in her final moments, in her fear and pain and loneliness, Isabella had called a dead woman's number broke something fundamental in Marco's soul. I'll leave you with these, Detective Reyes said softly. Again, I'm sorry for your loss. After she left, Marco sat in the library holding the phone records, staring at that final call. He dialed the number, knowing it would go nowhere, needing to hear what Isabella had heard. The number you have reached is no longer in service. Marco let the recording play through 3 times before hanging up. Isabella had been so desperate for comfort, for connection, for someone to tell her it would be okay, that she called a disconnected number just to hear the automated message. Because even that was more comforting than the silence of her empty house and absent husband. He pulled out his own phone and scrolled through his messages from February 10th. At 9:47 p.m., exactly when Isabella had called him, he'd been texting with Sophia. Marco, on my way up. Order champagne. Sophia, already done. Hurry up. I'm wearing the thing you like. Marco, 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Isabella had died, and he'd been 5 minutes away from his mistress's bed. Marco stood and walked to his study. The room was exactly as he'd left it 2 weeks ago, contracts spread across his desk, maps of his territory pinned to the walls, photographs of his enemies and allies arranged like a military general's war room. He swept it all to the floor. Then he opened the safe behind his desk and pulled out the one thing he'd been avoiding, his own phone records from the past year. He sat down and started going through them, cataloging every moment he'd chosen business over Isabella. The numbers were damning. In the 12 months before her death, Marco had answered 847 calls from his various business associates, declined 93 calls from Isabella, spent an average of 4.2 hours per day on business calls, spent an average of 6.3 minutes per day talking to his wife, sent 156 texts to Sophia, sent 23 texts to Isabella, most of them single-word responses like busy or later. He'd quantified his failure, reduced it to data points and statistics that proved beyond doubt that Isabella hadn't been wrong. He had killed her, maybe not with his hands, but with his choices. The door to his study opened, and Vincent entered without knocking, one of the few people with that privilege. His underboss looked concerned and exhausted. Marco, we need to talk. Not now, Vincent. It can't wait. Torino's making moves. He's taken 3 of our collection routes in the past week. The men are getting restless. They need to know you're still in charge. Marco looked at his oldest friend, the man who'd been by his side since they were teenagers running numbers for the old bosses. Do you remember Isabella, Vincent? I mean, really remember her, not just as the boss's wife. Vincent's expression softened. Yeah, boss. I remember. What was she like? She was. Vincent struggled for words. She was kind, always asking about my family, remembering my kids' birthdays. She never looked down on any of us, even though she could have. She treated everyone like they mattered. She matters more than any of this, Marco said, gesturing at the scattered papers. More than territory, more than respect, more than this whole goddamn empire. And I forgot that. I forgot her. Marco! I'm selling it. The words came out before Marco had fully formed the thought, but once spoken, he knew they were right. The whole operation. All of it. I'm out. Vincent's face went white. You can't be serious. You've spent 20 years building this. Your father spent his life building this. You can't just. My father died at 53 of a heart attack, leaving my mother a widow who drank herself to death within a year. My uncle died in prison, away from his family. My cousin Joey got shot in the street like a dog. This life, Marco's voice rose, this life we've built our whole existence around? It destroys everything it touches. And I let it destroy the one pure thing I ever had. Boss, you're not thinking clearly. You're grieving. Give it some time. Time! Marco laughed bitterly. I gave Isabella time. 3 years of time where I slowly killed her with neglect. How much more time do you want me to waste? Vincent sat down heavily, his face troubled. What about the men? What about their families? We employ 200 people directly, and twice that indirectly. You're not just walking away from an empire, Marco. You're walking away from a community. It was a valid point, and it gave Marco pause. He might be done with this life, but he couldn't just abandon everyone who depended on him. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm finding a better way. We'll restructure. Make everything legitimate. The restaurants, the construction company, the waste management. It can all be run legally. It'll mean less money, but it'll also mean fewer bodies. Including mine. And Torino, you think he's just going to let you walk away? Torino is exactly why I need to do this now. Marco stood and walked to the window. Because if I stay in this life, I'll eventually retaliate against him. Then he'll come back at me harder. Then I'll escalate, and it'll never end until one or both of us is dead. And the whole time, I'll be so focused on the war that I'll miss everything else. Just like I missed Isabella dying. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. You really loved her. I really did. I just forgot how to show it. Marco turned to face his friend. Help me, Vincent. Help me figure out how to get out without getting everyone killed. Then help me figure out how to make amends to a woman who's already gone. How do you make amends to the dead? Marco thought about the diary, about all of Isabella's unrealized dreams and hopes. I don't know yet, but I have to try. Because if I don't, if I just go back to business as usual, then she died for nothing. And I can't live with that. The two men stood in silence, the weight of the moment settling over them. Outside, Chicago continued its endless motion, people living and dying, loving and losing, building empires and watching them crumble. And in a mansion in Lincoln Park, a man who'd once commanded an empire began the hard work of learning how to be human again. 6 weeks after reading Isabella's diary, Marco Dante sat in a conference room full of lawyers, accountants, and very nervous crime bosses. The air was thick with tension and expensive cologne. Vincent Torino sat directly across from him, his thin face twisted in suspicion. Let me get this straight, Torino said, his voice dripping with contempt. You're offering to just give me the South Side ports? The routes we've been fighting over for 2 years? What's the catch, Dante? Marco met his eyes steadily. He'd lost 15 pounds in the past month and a half, his suits hanging loose on his frame. But his gaze was clearer than it had been in years. No catch. I'm restructuring my operations. Going legitimate. You can have the ports, the gambling operations, and the collection routes. All I ask in return is that you leave my people alone. The ones who want out get out clean. The room erupted in angry voices. Marco's own captains looked betrayed. The neutral mediators looked confused. And Torino looked like a man who'd been offered a gift too good to be true. This is bullshit. Tony Ricci, one of Marco's longest-serving soldiers, stood abruptly. Boss, we didn't build this empire to hand it over to this piece of... We didn't build an empire, Tony. Marco's quiet voice cut through the noise. We built a prison, and I'm done serving the sentence. Your wife's death has made you soft, Torino sneered. Made you weak. The Marco Dante I knew would never surrender. Something dangerous flashed in Marco's eyes. You're right. The Marco Dante you knew would have already put a bullet in your head for that comment. But that Marco Dante killed his wife through negligence. That Marco Dante was so obsessed with territory and respect that he let the woman he loved die alone. So yeah, that Marco Dante is dead. Good riddance. He stood, pulling out a folder and sliding it across the table to Torino. Those are the transfer documents. Sign them or don't. I don't actually care. As of today, I'm out. Anyone who wants to continue the life can work for you. Anyone who wants to walk away walks with my blessing and a severance package. And if I don't want your scraps, Torino challenged. What if I want it all? Your restaurants, your construction company, everything. Then you take it, Marco said simply. I'm not fighting you, Vincent. Not today. Not ever. You want my empire? It's yours. I'm done. The silence that followed was deafening. In the world they lived in, surrender meant death. It meant weakness. It meant the end of everything you'd built. But Marco had already lost everything that mattered. What was an empire compared to that? Torino studied him for a long moment, searching for the trap, the hidden angle. When he found nothing but exhausted sincerity, he laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. You're serious. You're actually walking away. I'm actually walking away. Then you're a fool. Torino signed the documents with a flourish. But I'm not fool enough to look a gift horse in the mouth. Enjoy your retirement, Dante. Try not to die of boredom. As the room cleared, Vincent approached Marco, his face grave. Boss, you sure about this? Once you walk out that door, there's no coming back. I don't want to come back. Marco clasped his friend's shoulder. I'm offering you a choice too, Vincent. You can stay with Torino and keep climbing the ladder, or you can help me build something different. Something legitimate. What would I do in the straight world? I've been a criminal since I was 16. So was I. But Isabella believed people could change. I want to honor that belief. I'm starting a foundation in her name. Cardiac research, medical assistance for families who can't afford treatment, counseling for people in abusive or neglectful relationships. I need someone I trust to help me run it. Marco paused. I need my friend, Vincent. Not my underboss. My friend. Vincent's eyes glistened. She really changed you. No. Losing her changed me. She tried to change me while she was alive, and I was too stubborn to listen. Marco's voice cracked. Now I have to change myself, and hope it's enough to honor her memory. 3 months later, Marco stood in the newly opened Isabella Dante Memorial Cardiac Center. The building was beautiful, modern, welcoming, filled with light. Everything his marriage hadn't been in its final year. The plaque near the entrance read, In memory of Isabella Rose Dante, who believed in second chances and the power of love to transform even the hardest hearts. May all who enter here find the care, compassion, and attention they deserve. It's beautiful, Maria said, standing beside him. She'd agreed to help run the center's patient support services, using her decades of caretaking experience to help families navigate medical crises. It's not enough, Marco replied. Nothing I do will ever be enough. Mrs. Isabella wouldn't want you to punish yourself forever, Maria said gently. She'd want you to live, to help others, to be the man she fell in love with. I'm not sure that man exists anymore. Then become someone better. The center's opening ceremony was small. Marco had specifically requested no press, no fanfare. Just the medical staff, some of Isabella's friends, and a few families who would be the first to benefit from the free cardiac care the center provided. Dr. Sarah Chun, the cardiologist who treated Isabella, cut the ribbon. This facility represents hope, she said to the gathered crowd. Hope that no one will have to choose between their health and their financial security. Hope that no one will suffer alone because they're afraid to ask for help. Hope that love, even love that comes too late, can still change the world. After the ceremony, Marco found himself alone in the chapel, a small, non-denominational space he'd insisted the center include. He sat in the quiet, staring at the simple altar, and pulled out Isabella's diary. He'd read it so many times the spine was cracked, the pages worn from handling. He opened to a random entry from their first year together. Marco did the sweetest thing today. He knows I've been stressed about the foundation interview. Yes, I'm still trying to get that volunteer position at the children's hospital. He's so supportive. So he came home early with takeout from my favorite Thai place and spent the whole evening helping me practice my interview answers. He believes in me in a way no one ever has before. He makes me feel like I can do anything. I'm so lucky to have married my best friend. Marco's hand trembled as he read. She'd wanted to volunteer at a children's hospital. That dream had died somewhere in year 2, when he'd started coming home too late for her to commit to a regular schedule. Another thing he'd stolen from her without even realizing it. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the empty chapel. "God, Isabella, I'm so sorry. For all of it. For every ignored call, every dismissed conversation, every moment I made you feel invisible. You deserved so much better than me." He'd been saying some version of these words every day for 3 months, and they never felt like enough. How did you apologize to a ghost? How did you make amends to someone who couldn't forgive you because they were already gone? "Mr. Dante?" A soft voice interrupted his spiral. He looked up to see a young woman, maybe 25, standing in the chapel doorway. "I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm Emily Vasquez. My mother is one of your first patients here." Marco wiped his eyes quickly, embarrassed to be caught crying. "It's fine. How is your mother?" She's going to live." Emily's voice broke. "We couldn't afford her medication. She was rationing her pills, taking half doses to make them last longer. She was getting sicker and sicker, and we didn't know what to do. Then we heard about this place, and she couldn't continue." Marco stood, his professional composure settling over him like armor. "I'm glad we could help. Can I ask you something?" Emily stepped into the chapel. "Why did you do this? Everyone says you used to be different, that you made your money in ways that weren't exactly legal. Why dedicate all of this to helping people?" Marco looked down at the diary in his hands. "My wife died because she couldn't afford her medication, because she was afraid to ask for help, because I made her feel like her health wasn't as important as my business." He met Emily's eyes. "I can't bring her back, but I can make sure no one else dies the way she did. Alone, afraid, convinced they're not worth saving." Emily was crying openly now. She must have been an amazing person. She was, and I was too blind to see it until it was too late. Marco closed the diary carefully. "Don't make my mistake, Emily. Tell the people you love that you love them. Show up for them. Answer their calls. Because you never know when the last chance will be your last chance." After Emily left, Marco sat in the chapel for another hour, thinking about second chances and redemption. He'd built this center, restructured his businesses, walked away from his empire. But none of it felt like enough. The guilt was still there, sharp and constant, a wound that wouldn't heal. His phone buzzed. A text from Vincent. "Need you at the restaurant. Something you should see." Marco drove to Dante's, the Italian restaurant that had been his first legitimate business, and was now the headquarters of his foundation work. Vincent met him at the door, his expression unreadable. "What is it?" "Come inside. Someone wants to talk to you." Marco followed him through the restaurant, past the early dinner crowd, to a private room in the back. Sitting at the table was a woman he'd never expected to see again, Carmen Rodriguez, Isabella's sister. She'd refused to speak to him since the funeral, had literally turned her back on him at the cemetery. He'd respected that distance, understanding he deserved nothing less. "Carmen," he said carefully, "I didn't know you were in Chicago." "I wasn't. I flew in today specifically to see you." Her voice was cold, but her eyes were red-rimmed. "Sit down, Marco. We need to talk." He sat, his heart hammering. Vincent quietly left the room, closing the door behind him. Carmen pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "Do you know what this is?" Marco opened it to find medical bills. Dozens of them, all addressed to Isabella Dante, all marked past due in angry red letters. His hands shook as he flipped through them. Emergency room visits, cardiologist appointments, medication costs, lab work. The total came to over $70,000. "She was drowning in debt," Carmen said, her voice breaking. "My sister, who married one of the richest men in Chicago, was drowning in medical debt because she was too afraid to tell you she was sick, too afraid to be an inconvenience." "I know," Marco whispered. "I know. The police showed me her records. I've been trying to. Trying to what? Pay them off now that she's dead? Build her a shrine to assuage your guilt. Carmen's anger finally burst through. Where were you, Marco? Where were you when she was scared and alone and dying? Where were you when she lost your baby? Where were you when she called you, begging for help? I was building an empire, Marco said flatly. I was too busy playing crime boss to notice my wife was dying. There's no excuse. There's no defense. I failed her completely. You did worse than fail her. You killed her. Carmen's words were like bullets. Maybe not legally, but morally, emotionally, you absolutely killed her. And now you're trying to buy forgiveness with your cardiac center and your foundation and your grand gestures. I'm not trying to buy forgiveness. Marco's voice was steady despite the tears running down his face. I know I can't be forgiven. I'm trying to make sure Isabella's death meant something. That some good came from my horrible failure. That's all. Carmen stared at him for a long moment. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. She wrote you a letter. Before she died, I found it in her things when I was cleaning out her apartment, the one you didn't even know she'd rented because you were so disconnected from her life. Apartment! She was planning to leave you, Marco. Had been for months. She rented a small place in Wicker Park, started moving things there little by little. She was going to serve you divorce papers right after her surgery. Start fresh. Build a life where she mattered. Carmen's voice broke, but she died before she could escape you. The words were a knife to Marco's gut. Isabella had been leaving him. She planned a whole future without him, and he'd been so oblivious he hadn't even noticed. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know the truth. All of it. Not just the sanitized version you've created in your head where you were a neglectful husband who made a tragic mistake. You need to know that your wife was so miserable, so lonely, so desperate to be seen, that she was secretly planning to leave you. That's how badly you failed her. Marco couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The guilt he'd been carrying for months doubled, tripled, became so heavy he thought it might crush him entirely. Read the letter, Carmen said, standing to leave. It's her final words to you. The ones she actually wanted you to have, not just the diary entries you found by accident. Then live with what you've done. That's your real punishment, not prison, not death, but living every day knowing exactly what you destroyed. She walked to the door, then paused. For what it's worth, the cardiac center is a good thing. My sister would have loved it. She always wanted to help people, wanted to make a difference. I'm glad you're doing that in her name. But it doesn't change what you did. It doesn't bring her back. And it doesn't make you a good man. It just makes you a guilty one trying to buy his way into heaven. After Carmen left, Marco sat alone in the private room, staring at the envelope. His name was written on it in Isabella's handwriting, that elegant script he'd seen on grocery lists and birthday cards and love notes from their early years together. He almost didn't open it. Part of him wanted to preserve this last mystery, keep this final piece of Isabella untouched. But he owed her the respect of reading her words. He owed her that much at least. With trembling hands, he opened the envelope. My dearest Marco, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I don't know if you'll find this letter, or if Carmen will give it to you, or if it'll just disappear into the void like so many of my attempts to reach you. But I need to write it anyway. For me. For closure. For the woman I used to be before I became invisible in my own marriage. I want you to know that I don't hate you. I probably should. You've hurt me in ways I didn't know I could be hurt. You've ignored me, neglected me, and chose everything. Your business, your empire, your mistress, over me. But I don't hate you. I'm just sad. Sad for what we could have been. Sad for the man you used to be. Sad for the life we promised each other and never quite managed to build. Do you remember our wedding day? You held my hands and promised to love me, honor me, and cherish me for all our days. You meant it then. I know you did. I saw it in your eyes, felt it in your touch. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. You got so caught up in building your empire that you forgot to build our marriage. And I got so caught up in trying to be the perfect mob wife that I forgot to fight for what I needed. I'm leaving you, Marco. By the time you read this, I'll probably have already filed the papers. I can't do this anymore. The loneliness, the invisibility, the constant feeling that I'm in the way of your real life. I deserve better. I deserve to be someone's priority, not their afterthought. I deserve to be seen. I want you to know about the baby. Our baby. I was pregnant, Marco. For a few beautiful, terrifying weeks, I carried our child. I wanted to tell you so badly. I practiced the announcement 100 different ways. But you were never there. And when I finally got the courage to interrupt your important business, I couldn't get the words out. And then it was too late. I lost the baby. I lost our chance at being a family. I don't blame you for the miscarriage, but I do blame you for making me face it alone. I blame you for not noticing I was in pain. I blame you for choosing your mistress over your wife on the night I needed you most. That blame is something I'll carry forever, even as I try to build a new life without you. Here's what I need you to understand, Marco. You're not a bad man. You're not a monster. You're just a man who lost his way, who got so focused on the destination that he forgot about the journey, who built an empire but destroyed his home. I hope someday you find your way back. Not to me, it's too late for us, but to yourself, to the man you used to be before ambition consumed you. I'm dying, Marco. My heart is failing. The doctors say I need surgery, and even then, the prognosis isn't great. I don't know if I'll survive it. I don't know if I want to, honestly. I'm so tired. Tired of fighting for scraps of attention. Tired of being lonely in a house full of people. Tired of loving someone who forgot how to love me back. If I don't make it through the surgery, I need you to know something. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it. Not because you've earned it. But because I can't carry this hurt into whatever comes next. I forgive you for the neglect, the affair, the indifference. I forgive you for letting me die a little bit every day for 3 years. I forgive you for not being the husband I needed. But Marco, you need to forgive yourself. That's the real work. That's the real penance. Not building monuments to your guilt or drowning in remorse, but actually changing. Actually becoming the man you were supposed to be. Not for me, it's too late for me, but for whoever comes next. For the people whose lives you touch. For yourself. Don't waste your grief. Don't let my death be just another tragedy in your collection. Let it transform you. Let it break you open so the light can get in. Let it teach you what really matters before it's too late. I loved you, Marco Dante. Until my very last breath, I loved you. I just wish you'd love me back the same way. I wish you'd chosen me. Just once, I wish you'd chosen me. Goodbye, my love. I hope you find peace. I hope you find purpose. I hope you find a way to live with what you've done. And I hope someday you find a way to love someone the way you should have loved me. Forever yours, even in death, Isabella. Marco read the letter 3 times, then a 4th, each word carving itself into his soul. She'd forgiven him. Even knowing about Sophia, even facing death alone, even after everything, Isabella had forgiven him. It was more than he deserved, more than he could bear. He folded the letter carefully and pressed it to his chest, feeling the weight of her forgiveness like a physical thing. She'd given him permission to move forward, to change, to become something better than the man who'd failed her. The question was, could he do it? 1 year after Isabella's death, Marco stood in the Isabella Dante Memorial Cardiac Center during their first anniversary celebration. The center had helped over 300 families in its first year, providing free cardiac care to those who couldn't afford it. 0 people had died from lack of medication. 0 people had suffered alone because they were afraid to ask for help. It's not enough, Marco said to Dr. Chen, who became the center's medical director. 300 families is amazing, but there are thousands more who need help. So we expand, Dr. Chen said with a smile. I've been looking at properties in Detroit, St. Louis, and Cleveland. Working-class cities where cardiac disease is rampant and resources are scarce. We could open satellite centers, maybe 1 every 6 months. Do it, Marco said immediately. Whatever you need. Money, staff, resources, it's yours. You know, when we first met, you scared me, Dr. Chen admitted. You had this aura of danger about you. Like violence was always just beneath the surface. You're different now. My wife is dead. My empire is gone. I'm different because I have nothing left to lose except my chance at redemption. I think you're already redeeming yourself. Marco shook his head. Redemption isn't a destination. It's a daily choice. Every day I have to choose to be better than I was. Every day I have to work to honor Isabella's memory. Some days are easier than others. That night, Marco visited Isabella's grave. He came every week without fail, usually late at night when the cemetery was empty. He'd replace the modest headstone her family had chosen with something grander, white marble engraved with her favorite quote from Mary Oliver. "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" He sat on the bench he'd installed nearby and pulled out the diary. He didn't read it anymore. He'd memorized every word. He just held it, this physical connection to the woman he'd lost. "I opened the Detroit Center today," he told her. "Well, we broke ground anyway. It'll be open by spring. Dr. Chin thinks we can help another 200 families there. Maybe more." He paused. "I'm also working with the state legislature on a bill to make cardiac medication more affordable. They're calling it Isabella's Law. It probably won't pass. Too much pharmaceutical lobbying, but we're trying." He was quiet for a moment, listening to the wind in the trees. "Carmen came by the center last week. She didn't talk to me, but she toured the facility. Saw all the families we're helping. I think maybe she's starting to understand what I'm trying to do. Or maybe she just feels sorry for me. Either way, it's progress." Marco looked up at the stars, thinking about fate and choice and the thin line between the two. "I met someone. Her name is Grace. She's a grief counselor at the center, helps families cope with cardiac trauma. She asked me to coffee last week. I said no. It felt too soon. Too disrespectful to your memory." He laughed bitterly. "Even though I had no problem disrespecting your memory when you were alive with Sophia." Grace said something interesting, though. She said the best way to honor someone who died is to actually live. Not to turn yourself into a monument of grief, but to become the person they believed you could be. I think you'd like her. She's kind and smart, and she sees people, really sees them. Like you used to see me before I stopped looking back." He stood, pressing his hand to the cold marble of her headstone. "I'm trying, Isabella. Every day, I'm trying to be the man you deserved. The man you believed I could be. I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if anything will ever be enough. But it's all I have." As he walked back to his car, Marco's phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. "Foundation board meeting tomorrow at 9. Also, Grace asked about you. Said she hoped you'd reconsider the coffee." Marco stared at the message for a long time. Isabella's letter had told him not to waste his grief. To let her death transform him, not destroy him. To learn how to love someone the way he should have loved her. He typed back, "Tell Grace yes. Coffee would be nice." It felt like betrayal and redemption all at once. Like moving forward while carrying his guilt. Like honoring Isabella's memory by becoming someone worthy of being remembered himself. That night, Marco had a dream. He was in their old house, and Isabella was there. Not the sick, dying Isabella of those final months, but the young, vibrant woman he'd married. She was in the kitchen making coffee, humming to herself, exactly like she used to do on Sunday mornings. "Isabella," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry." She turned to him with that smile he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "I know you are, Marco. That's why you need to stop apologizing and start living. That's the apology I'm waiting for. Your life, lived well, lived fully, lived with intention. That's how you make amends to me." "I don't know if I can." "Yes, you can. You're already doing it. The center, the foundation, the work to change, that's you living. That's you loving. That's you being the man I always knew you could be." She walked toward him, and he felt the warmth of her presence even in this dream. "Let me go, Marco. Not because I want you to forget me, but because I want you to remember me by becoming everything we talked about when we were young and stupid and in love. I want you to love someone the way you should have loved me. I want you to show up for someone the way you never showed up for me. I want you to answer their calls. What if I fail again? Then you'll fail. But at least you'll fail trying to be better, not trying to be powerful. That's all that matters in the end. Not what you built, but who you became." She kissed his forehead, and it felt like forgiveness and goodbye all at once. "I have to go now. But Marco, I'm proud of you. For the first time in years, I'm proud of the man you're becoming." Marco woke with tears streaming down his face and the overwhelming sense that Isabella had actually been there. That she'd actually released him from the prison of his guilt. Not completely. He'd carry what he'd done for the rest of his life. But enough to breathe. Enough to try. Enough to live. 6 months later, Marco sat in a small coffee shop with Grace Martinez, listening to her talk about her work with grieving families. She was beautiful in a quiet way. Dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, warm brown eyes that really looked at you when you spoke, hands that gestured expressively as she talked about the people she helped. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, laughing. "I'm monopolizing the conversation. Tell me about you. What do you do when you're not running a cardiac foundation?" Marco considered the question. What did he do? "I visit my wife's grave once a week. I read her diary to remember what I lost. I work with legislators to change healthcare laws. I fund medical research. I try to become someone who deserves a second chance at life, even though I squandered my first chance so completely." Grace's expression was compassionate but firm. "That's what you do to punish yourself. What do you do for joy?" "Joy?" The concept felt foreign. "Yes, joy. That thing humans experience when they allow themselves to live instead of just existing. Hobbies, interests, things that make you smile." "Do you remember how to smile, Marco?" He thought about it. When was the last time he'd smiled, really smiled, without the weight of guilt crushing it immediately? "I'm not sure I deserve to. And that's why you need therapy, not just coffee with me." Grace leaned forward, her voice gentle but insistent. "Marco, I've read your wife's letter. You shared it with our board when you created the foundation. Do you remember what she said? She told you to let her death transform you, not destroy you. Transformation requires joy. It requires living. It requires being something more than a walking monument to your failures. How do I do that? How do I find joy when I know what I've done?" "You start small. You find one thing, just one thing, that makes you feel alive. Not guilty, not ashamed, not burdened. Just alive. Then you build from there." Grace smiled. "For me, it's salsa dancing. Terrible at it, but I love it. For my brother, it's woodworking. For my best friend, it's terrible karaoke. What's yours?" Marco thought back to before Isabella, before the Empire, before he became Marco Dante, crime boss. "I used to paint. Nothing fancy, just watercolors. Landscapes mostly. My mother taught me when I was a kid. So paint. I haven't touched a brush in 20 years. Then it's time to start again." Grace pulled out her phone and typed something. "There's a beginner's watercolor class at the community center on Thursday nights. I'm signing you up." "Grace, I don't think." "You don't have to think. You just have to show up. That's what your wife needed from you, right? For you to show up. So show up. For this class. For yourself. For the life you're building." Marco stared at this woman, who barely knew him but somehow understood exactly what he needed. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I've spent 5 years helping people process grief, and I can tell the difference between someone who's mourning and someone who's self-destructing. You're right on the edge, Marco. You can either tip toward life or toward death. I'm trying to push you toward life." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Your wife forgave you. Now you need to figure out if you can forgive yourself. Not completely. Some things we carry forever. But enough to live. Enough to love again. Enough to be human." That Thursday, Marco showed up to the watercolor class. He was the only man in a room full of retired women who welcomed him with a kind of no-nonsense warmth that reminded him of his mother. He was terrible at painting. His brush strokes were clumsy, his colors muddy, his landscapes unrecognizable. And for the first time in a year, he felt something other than guilt. Not joy exactly, but maybe the possibility of joy. The tiniest crack in the armor of his self-punishment. He painted for 2 hours, losing himself in the simple act of creation. When the class ended, he looked at his finished piece, a messy watercolor of Grant Park, the place where he and Isabella had picnicked in those early, happy days. One of the women, a cheerful grandmother named Ruth, peered at his painting. "Is that Grant Park?" "It was supposed to be. I'm not very good." "Nonsense. It's beautiful. And more importantly, you look peaceful. That's rarer than talent." Ruth patted his hand. "Keep coming back, dear. Art isn't about being good. It's about being present. And you were very present today. Present." Marco thought about the word as he drove home. He'd been absent for so long. Absent from his marriage, from his life, from himself. Maybe presence was the beginning of redemption. Not grand gestures or monuments, but simply showing up. Being there. Paying attention. That night, he called Grace. "I went to the class. And I painted the worst landscape in the history of watercolors. But I felt something. Not quite joy, but adjacent to it. That's good, Marco. That's really good. He could hear the smile in her voice. Want to celebrate with dinner? There's a great Italian place in Little Italy. No pressure, just two friends eating carbonara and talking about life. Marco thought about Isabella, about her final letter telling him to love someone the way he should have loved her. About her dream visit telling him to let her go by becoming everything they'd once dreamed about. About the year he'd spent learning to be human again. I'd like that, he said. Tomorrow night. Tomorrow night. 2 years after Isabella's death, Marco stood in front of a packed auditorium at Northwestern University. He was giving a lecture, something he never thought he'd do, about the hidden costs of ambition and the importance of work-life balance. It was part of the university's business ethics program, and he'd been invited to speak about his experience. I built an empire, he told the audience of young, ambitious students. I had money, power, respect. I had everything I thought I wanted, and it cost me everything that actually mattered. My wife died because I was too busy to notice she was sick, too important to answer her calls, too focused on building my legacy to realize I was destroying my home. He clicked to the next slide, a photo of Isabella from their wedding day, radiant and hopeful. This was Isabella. She was kind, intelligent, and patient. She loved me despite my flaws, supported my dreams, and asked for very little in return. Just my time, just my attention, just proof that she mattered to me. And I couldn't give her that. I gave her money, security, a beautiful home. But I didn't give her me. Marco showed them excerpts from the diary, not the most painful ones, but enough to illustrate his point. She documented my failures, every missed dinner, every declined call, every moment I chose work over her. And I never knew because I never looked. I was too busy conquering the world to notice I was losing my home. So what's the lesson here? He looked out at the sea of young faces, seeing his younger self reflected in their ambitious eyes. The lesson is that success without presence is just elaborate failure. That an empire built on neglect is worthless. That you can win the whole world and lose your soul in the process. He clicked to the final slide. The Isabella Dante Memorial Cardiac Center, now with locations in 5 cities and plans for 3 more. This is my penance. This is how I honor the woman I failed. By making sure other families don't suffer the way she did. By advocating for affordable health care. By teaching people like you that balance isn't weakness, it's wisdom. A student raised her hand. Mr. Dante, do you think you can ever really make up for what happened? No, Marco answered honestly. There's no making up for it. There's only living with it and trying to be better. I can't bring Isabella back. I can't undo my failures. But I can learn from them. I can share my story, so maybe, someone in this room will answer their spouse's call instead of sending it to voicemail. Maybe someone will notice when their partner is struggling. Maybe someone will choose love over ambition before it's too late. After the lecture, a young woman approached him. She was crying. My dad is just like you were. Always working, never home. My mom tries so hard to reach him, and he just doesn't see her. Can I give him your contact information? Maybe hearing your story would help. Marco wrote down his number. Tell him to call me anytime. Tell him I'll explain exactly what it feels like to realize you ignored your wife's dying call. If that doesn't wake him up, nothing will. He gave 17 more lectures that year. Spoke to business schools, medical conferences, marriage counseling sessions. Anywhere people would listen. He told Isabella's story and his own. Not to absolve himself, nothing could do that. But to warn others away from his mistakes. You're making a real difference, Grace told him one evening as they walked along Lake Michigan. They'd been dating for 6 months now, taking things slowly, carefully. Marco had learned patience through loss. I saw a study that showed a 23% increase in men seeking couples counseling after your TED Talk went viral. It's not enough. Marco! Grace stopped walking, turning to face him. It's never going to be enough. You're never going to feel like you've done enough to make up for losing Isabella. But you can't live your entire life on your knees, begging a ghost for forgiveness you've already received. You have to stand up. You have to move forward. What if I'm not ready? Then you wait until you are. But Marco, Isabella isn't waiting for you on the other side with a scorecard. tallying up your good deeds. She's at peace. The only person keeping you trapped in guilt is you. Marco looked out at the water, thinking about drowning and swimming and the choice between the two. I think I'm falling in love with you. Grace's breath caught. That terrifies you. It does. Because what if I fail again? What if I get so caught up in the foundation and the work and everything else that I forget to see you? What if I become the same man who killed his wife through neglect? You won't. How can you be so sure? Because you're not that man anymore. That man didn't go to therapy twice a week. That man didn't show up to watercolor classes and grief support groups and lectures about work-life balance. That man didn't check in every day and ask how I'm feeling and actually listen to the answer. You've changed, Marco. You've done the work. Now you have to trust that the work matters. What if it's not enough? Grace took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. Then it's not enough, and we'll deal with it together. But Marco, you can't live in fear of repeating the past. You have to trust yourself to be different, to be better, to be the man Isabella believed you could become. That night, Marco dreamed of Isabella again. They were in Grant Park, sitting on the grass like they had all those years ago. The sun was warm, the sky impossibly blue. Isabella looked healthy, vibrant, alive. You're in love, she said, smiling. I can tell. I feel guilty about it. Of course you do. You're you. Isabella laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound. But Marco, I meant what I said in my letter. I want you to love someone the way you should have loved me. Grace is good for you. She sees you. Really sees you. Don't push her away because you're afraid of failing again. What if I do fail? Then you fail. But you'll fail trying to be better, and that's what matters. You're not the man who let me die, Marco. You're the man who learned from letting me die. That's different. That's growth. That's transformation. She stood, brushing grass from her dress. I have to go now. For real this time. No more dream visits. No more guidance from beyond the grave. You have to live your life without me now. You have to trust yourself. Isabella, wait. I'm proud of you. She kissed his forehead, just like in the last dream. I'm so proud of the man you've become. Now go be that man. Love Grace. Build your centers. Help people. Live. Really, truly live. That's how you honor my memory, not by staying stuck in grief, but by becoming everything I always knew you could be. I love you. I know. And I love you. But Marco, it's time to let me go. Not forget me, never forget me. But let me go. Marco woke up knowing it was the last time. Isabella was gone. Truly, finally gone. Not from his memory, not from his heart, but from his active life. She'd released him, and now he had to figure out how to live with that freedom. 3 months later, Marco proposed to Grace in Grant Park, in the same spot where he and Isabella had watched clouds all those years ago. I can't promise I'll be perfect, he told her, kneeling in the grass with his grandmother's ring. I can't promise I won't sometimes get too focused on work, or forget to call, or struggle with the guilt I carry. But I can promise I'll show up. I'll answer your calls. I'll see you, really see you every single day. And if I start to slip, if I start to become that man again, I give you permission to call me on it. Yes, Grace said, pulling him up and kissing him. Yes to all of it. Yes to the imperfect, healing man you are. Yes to building a life together. Yes to honoring Isabella by being present. Yes. They married quietly 6 months later. No big wedding, no society event, just close friends and family. Carmen attended, and afterward, she pulled Marco aside. She would have liked Grace, Carmen said. She would have been happy you found someone who sees you. Thank you for saying that. And Marco, Carmen's eyes were wet. Thank you for the centers. For Isabella's law, it passed, by the way, did you hear? For turning your grief into something that helps people. My sister would have loved that. She always wanted to make a difference. She did make a difference. She changed me. No, Carmen corrected gently. You changed yourself. She gave you the reason, but you did the work. Be proud of that. 5 years after Isabella's death, Marco stood in the newest Isabella Dante Memorial Cardiac Center in Atlanta. It was their 10th location, with 5 more in development. They'd helped over 5,000 families, passed 3 major healthcare reform bills, and trained hundreds of medical professionals in providing trauma-informed cardiac care. It's incredible, Dr. Chen said, looking around at the packed celebration. 10 centers in 5 years. You've built something really special here, Marco. We've built something special, he corrected. This isn't my redemption project anymore. It's our mission. His phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Baby is kicking like crazy. I think she knows it's a special day. Marco smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Grace was 7 months pregnant with their daughter. They were naming her Hope Isabella Dante, a name that honored the past while looking toward the future. I need to make a quick call, he told Dr. Chen, stepping outside into the Atlanta sunshine. He called Grace, and she answered on the first ring. Hey, you. How's the ceremony? Perfect. Emotional. Meaningful. Marco paused. I wish you were here. Me too, but doctor's orders. No flying in the 3rd trimester. But I'm with you in spirit, and so is she. Grace paused. Have you been thinking about what you're going to say in your speech? I have. I think I'm finally ready to talk about what I've learned. Not just about loss and grief, but about transformation and hope. I'm proud of you, Marco. In case I don't say it enough, I'm really proud of the man you've become. After they hung up, Marco stood in the sunshine, feeling the weight of 5 years of work, therapy, growth, and transformation. He thought about the man he'd been, the crime boss, so consumed with power that he'd let his wife die. And he thought about the man he was now, imperfect, healing but present. He pulled out his phone and opened the photo app. He kept 2 pictures there, one of Isabella from their wedding day, radiant with hope, and one of Grace from last week, her hand on her pregnant belly, smiling at the camera with joy. I did it, Isabella, he whispered. I became the man you believed I could be. Not perfect, not redeemed, but better. Trying, present. I answer the calls now. I show up. I see the people I love. The wind rustled through the trees, and for just a moment, Marco could have sworn he heard Isabella's voice. I know. I'm proud of you. That evening, Marco gave a speech to a crowd of donors, medical professionals, patients, and families. He told Isabella's story one more time, but with a different ending. My wife died 5 years ago because I failed to see her, he said, his voice steady and clear. Because I chose ambition over love, empire over home, success over presence. For a long time, I thought that made me irredeemable. I thought the only thing I could do was build monuments to my guilt and hope that somehow made up for what I'd done. But I've learned something in these 5 years of running this foundation, going to therapy, and learning to be human again. Redemption isn't about grand gestures. It's about daily choices. It's about answering the phone when your spouse calls. It's about noticing when someone you love is struggling. It's about showing up, even when, especially when it's inconvenient. He looked around the room at all the faces. These centers exist because I failed my wife. That's the truth. But they thrive because thousands of people have chosen to be better than I was. Every doctor who takes extra time with a patient, every volunteer who sits with a scared family, every person who donated time or money or expertise. You're all making the choice I didn't make, to see people, to value presence over profit, to understand that success means nothing if you're successful alone. Isabella wrote in her final letter that she wanted her death to transform me, not destroy me. For a long time, I didn't understand the difference. I thought transformation meant punishing myself forever, carrying my guilt like a cross until it crushed me. But I've learned that transformation means something else. It means becoming who you were always supposed to be. It means learning from your failures and choosing differently next time. It means answering the call. Marco's voice cracked slightly. I can't bring my wife back. I can't undo my failures. I can't erase the fact that I was a terrible husband who let the woman I loved die alone. But I can make sure her death mattered. I can make sure something good came from something terrible. I can build a world where no one has to choose between their health and their dignity, where no one has to suffer alone because they're afraid to ask for help. That's what these centers represent. Not my guilt, not my redemption, but Isabella's legacy. Her kindness, her compassion, her belief that people deserve better. She believed in second chances, even when I didn't deserve one. She forgave me when I couldn't forgive myself. And she asked me to live, really live, not just exist in a prison of my own making. So I'm living. I'm showing up. I'm answering the calls. And I'm asking all of you to do the same. Notice the people in your life. See them. Value them. Don't wait until it's too late to realize what you have. Don't make my mistake. Don't let ambition or distraction or pride blind you to what really matters. He pulled out Isabella's diary. He still carried it everywhere and held it up. This book contains every moment I failed my wife. Every ignored call. Every dismissed conversation. Every time I chose something else over her. I keep it as a reminder. Not to torture myself, but to remember. To never forget what happens when you stop seeing the people you love. But you know what else I carry? Marco pulled out his phone and showed the 2 photos, Isabella and Grace. These remind me that transformation is possible. That people can change. That failure doesn't have to be final. Isabella's death taught me how to live. Her forgiveness taught me how to forgive myself. And her belief in second chances taught me that it's never too late to become who you're supposed to be. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting this work. Thank you for choosing to see people, to value presence, to understand that true success means showing up for the people you love. And thank you for helping me turn the worst mistake of my life into something that helps others. That's all any of us can do. Learn from our failures and try to be better. To Isabella, he raised his glass, who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself, who forgave me even when I didn't deserve it, who taught me, through her life and her death, what really matters. May we all honor her memory by being present, by answering the call, by seeing the people in our lives before it's too late. The room erupted in applause, but Marco barely heard it. He was looking at Grace's photo on his phone, thinking about the daughter they'd soon meet, about the life they were building together. His phone buzzed with a text from Grace, watching the live stream. You did her proud. You do me proud. Come home soon. We miss you. Marco smiled and typed back, on my way. Love you. Always. And for the first time in 5 years, the guilt that had been his constant companion eased just slightly. Not gone. It would never be completely gone. But manageable. Transformed from a crushing weight into a reminder. A touchstone. A reason to keep choosing better, keep showing up, keep answering the call. He walked out of the center into the warm Atlanta evening, and somewhere in the distance, he could have sworn he heard Isabella's voice one last time. Thank you, Marco, for becoming the man I always knew you could be. Now go home to your family. Go be present. Go live. And that's exactly what Marco Dante did. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love the story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.